Hey guys, we're back with some thoughts about Act 2 of episode Revenant as we near the end of this episode, and I think the big elephant in the room, it seems the dev cycle has yet to catch up with what we're seeing in game. What do I mean by that? While you can implement the change in how the formula goes for the storytelling, essentially what has happened in Destiny is we are seeing the death of the weekly story cadence and a new kind of small batch of story where you have each act releasing, maybe 10 quest lines, which meaning like 10 things for you to go do, and then that's the end of the act. This formula seems as though, at least for this act, that maybe the story was created with the weekly cadence in mind, but they adapted it to essentially fit this new cadence, which is we get this big batch or medium batch of story every 30-40 days or so. And it's an adjustment as much for us as players because we're used to coming back each Tuesday for new story beats, and it's an adjustment for the team as well because you're used to making the story that way, and it takes a while for that to catch up because the story for Revenant was probably being made when we were playing Final Shape or before Final Shape came out. So there was no feedback on that cadence. At least there was very little feedback on that cadence and really what they were going to do instead. And trust me, Bungie knew they were going to have to change this cadence eventually because, it was getting stale. And we were promised that with episode Echoes, and it kind of changed, but it kind of didn't, except there was a very small change. It was just a weekly cadence, but only for a few weeks, and then a very long break that was supposed to allow for more dev time, and it seemingly hasn't worked out yet. And let's assume that for now, episode 3 will be the huge benefactor of all of this break time, essentially allowing the devs to cook while we have these large breaks in place. That's the hope, and that's really where I'd look right now. If you're an avid Destiny 2 player and you're kind of upset with the amount of story, the quality of story, then wait for episode 3 to kind of make your judgment on the episodes in general. I would say so far, though, episodes haven't really done enough to distance themselves from seasons. And with that in mind, the seasonal model was just not really liked anymore to this point. And, this is my opinion. Feel free to disagree with it. But I really think that Bungie could have just tossed these seasons to the wayside and maybe fold them into the expansions somehow or something along those sides, just to let the next expansion cook. And of course, they were never going to do that because they need to make money in order to fund those expansions, and that's where episodes 1 through 3 come into mind. And well, they don't seem to be doing too much for the game right now. Like I said, episode 3 might be the one that bears fruit in this situation, the one that's on the tail end and getting the most dev time. And they've collected so much feedback, and it was towards the end of its dev cycle when the feedback about Echoes was coming out and how people didn't like Echoes and the cadence that it had and wanted more of these big releases each act to kind of satiate that Destiny itch and then come back in a month or so to do it again. I also think a huge problem that these episodes have is that it feels like there's not that much going on, when in reality, there's a lot happening, right? And spoilers for anyone who has not done the story up to this point. If you don't want to be spoiled, then stop watching now. But essentially, we have like 3 or 4 story beats going right now, maybe even more than that, right? I think the big one is that Mithrax or Mithrax, as it's properly said, he's turning into Nezarec, seemingly. And to me, it's really like head scratching how nobody's. I think everyone knows this is happening. Like Ido, like she knows she needs to cure him. That's why she's working on the tonics with Aramis to try and find a cure or some kind of treatment for Mithrax, but of course that hasn't been successful yet. And we kind of knew this was going to happen because Nezarec was like asking about who drank my juju juice that I had when I did not just say that, oh my god, but who drank my potions, right? Because I know they're gonna be like me soon. And he also said, as we killed him, that we'll never forget him. Like, you're never gonna be able to get rid of fear, because he's literally the god of fear and pain and all that. So fear from your species potentially going extinct, which is what Mithrax is experiencing right now, is very real, and that might be what Nezarec is feeding off of. So that's a lot to digest, and again, there hasn't been a lot of time to really flesh that out, what Mithrax is going through, and I kind of wish there were. We'll see at the end of the act, so that's kind of like a work in progress, so to speak, because, you know, the exotic mission could have a lot to do with that. We'll just have to wait and see on that one. And then, of course, you have this dynamic between Ido and Aramis, which kind of seems like the classic hero trusting the anti-hero to help in the cause. And ultimately, it seems Aramis will most likely choose her self-preservation and that of her house over that of maybe Mithrax and Ido. But we don't know. She could have some kind of realization and a moment where she does become a part of the hero and the heroism, and aligns with the House of Light just to survive, right? Because Fickrul and the Revenant Barons are literally just trying to turn everyone into zombies right now. And obviously, if that happens to Aramis, she won't have any sort of free will. She'll just become like a zombie, right? Albeit a powerful one. And she doesn't want that to happen, right? She'd rather like go back to, you know, cat and mouse fighting with the Vanguard and the House of Light instead of just being a mindless soldier under the control of Fickrul. And obviously Ido is eager to help her dad no matter what, and obviously preserve her species as well. Did I mention this is a very Ido-centric episode? Because she's also getting tutored by Varix, which I love that Varix is in this episode. It's a very Elixni heavy episode, and it's great to see this relationship between a really, really old member of Elixni society with Ido, who's somewhat new to being a scribe, and Varix is walking her through it, and that's an excellent relationship dynamic as well. And it would be nice to see more of that, if I'm going to be honest, as well. And you also have Crow in all of this, who has a very awkward situation to be in. We've kind of seen him already fight his dark self in Aldrin, if that makes sense. You know, it's kind of like the darker version of him. Now he's essentially the light version of himself and a much better version of himself. And he's facing this dilemma of, you know, he kind of created Fickrul, albeit in a past life, but it's essentially his responsibility. And we can only imagine the type of thoughts that are going through his head, in a sense that, you know, he's facing his own demons, so to speak, right now. And the emotional toll there is probably pretty high. My question, though, is as well, Marasov could be involved in this. We've heard mentions of Petrovenge, but obviously we haven't seen her in this story yet. And that, I mean, it would make sense too, because everything that's been going on for the most part has taken place in the Reef, and the Awoken still live there, so, like, what's going on with that? Anyways, there's a lot going on, and the story that we've gotten so far hasn't, in my opinion, done enough to really flesh everything out and give it kind of the air that it needs, and that is a huge problem, at least as far as the story goes. at least for now, as well, because Act 3 could help a little bit, but if it's, you know, if we follow the pattern here, it'll maybe just be a few quest steps more than Act 2 was, maybe more. But again, I don't think we'll get that satisfaction that we were supposed to get with these episodes. They're supposed to be standalone stories from beginning to end that provide a satisfying finish. And that's what Echoes didn't really have a satisfying finish. I mean, sure, we stood up to Maya Sundaresh, we drove her away, whatever. But there wasn't really an ending. I mean, she could still be on Nessus creating havoc, or somewhere else, you know, just waiting to make more of an issue for us. That story isn't over. Like, she's gonna pop up somewhere. And I feel like Revenant might be a similar thing. Like, we might wound Pickrell, or we might just take the Echo from him because it seemingly doesn't want to be with him. That's another story beat, by the way. The Echo is revolting against Pickrell, which is weird that it would revolt and, you know, kind of like resist Pickrell, but it didn't resist Maya, which is weird. They're both very similar in that, I mean, Maya wanted to turn everyone into Vex and control them, and Pickrell, kind of a similar thing. He wants to turn them into Scorn zombies and essentially control them as well. Their motives are very similar, so I don't know if maybe the Echo was resisting Maya and maybe she had to fight that as well, but that would be an interesting thing to explore with her later. But again, I feel like we're just going to take the Echo from Pickrell, and he's still going to be floating out there with a chance to maybe find some other source of power to attempt to attack the House of Light or the Last City again. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, obviously, but I hope this has a more satisfying ending, whether it's us imprisoning Pickrell, which I think would be the best option, to kind of learn how the Scorn tick and come up with a defense against them, or maybe try to make them allies. Stranger things have happened, right? And then, of course, the other option is to just kill him, but that seems to be incredibly difficult. So, you know, I assume something will happen in Act 3 to change that reality, but again, we'll have to wait and see. So let's get to the meatier part of this. And the narrative, I know there was a lot to unpack there, and that's why I feel like I've spent more time talking about it in this video than it has been talked about in the game so far, which is not good. But the loot is something that I do need to talk about. So there was a change from the episodic or seasonal weapons being craftable, going and getting your red borders and crafting the god rolls that you desire, to chasing them. And the reason this is a problem slightly, it's not a huge issue because, I mean, either way, you're going to get your god roll eventually. But I would love to see double perks make a return in a more meaningful fashion. Now, if you remember in Into the Light, there was the increased drop rates in Onslaught. And that was a fun time. And it was only for a limited time. I think I would like to see something like that in this act. Cut. I would like to see something similar to that at the beginning of each act. Maybe for like the first week or the first 2 weeks, you have an increased drop rate for these weapons. And the tonics, you know, you could make them useful for something else as well, having some kind of increase in the chance for these already masterworked double drop rate guns to drop. I've played a lot of the Expert Onslaught Salvation, and I've only gotten one teensy weensy masterworked double perked gun, and it was that freaking sidearm, which is, it's hot garbage, at least in PvE. And I was like, I don't want that. There are much better guns that I would prefer. And, you know, I got the side. It didn't have PvP perks anyways. It was just a horrible roll overall. So, yeah, I would like to see the drop rate either increased, maybe at the end of the act, to kind of say thank you, or in the entirety of Act 3 could have an increased drop rate. That would be cool as well, because then everyone can get their weapons and be like, peace out. That would be a little easy, I suppose, but you would have to do export for it anyway, so it is kind of a challenge. And listen, the challenge should be rewarded. If you're gonna play the hardest version of the hardest, or the seasonal activity, right, you should be rewarded with good loot. And sure, you get a lot of materials, you get a lot of Ascendant alloys, but I'm not saying it should be guaranteed, I'm just saying you should have a really good chance, right? Because even if you get the double perked Masterwork to drop, there's no guarantee that it's going to have the perks you want, right? And you can always chase that 5 of 5 as well. Say you get a 4 of 5 or a 3 of 5, but you want to get that 5 of 5. You can keep going and obviously keep that, 80-90% roll of what you want, and until you get the better version of that. So that would be cool. Contest of Elders, I feel like, isn't hard enough, and I get very bored with it very quickly. Even the hard version just isn't fun. I wish it was harder. That's all I have to say. And I also wish you could get double perk drops from that as well. At least like the higher rounds, the higher difficulty rounds. Because again, the challenge should match the reward, right? I feel like that's something we're kind of lacking here. And as far as gameplay and activity goes, I already kind of touched on that. Tomb of Elders, even the Contest of Elders just feels way too easy, and it's not fun in any way, shape, or form. Onslaught is moderately challenging, at least for me. It's different for everyone. It would be nice to, again, see a higher drop rate of those double perk guns as you get further into that Onslaught run. And I think this is something that a lot of people want, is a 30 wave Onslaught would be just fantastic. Obviously ending in somewhere around the Master difficulty, whereas a 50 wave would be, up to Grandmaster once you get to that wave 50. And the field work, which is the quests you can get from Ido, really it's just patrol work. It's nothing revolutionary. I don't like that at all. I kind of wish those were just like objectives you naturally complete as you do Onslaught and Tomb of Elders. But instead it's just go patrol and pick up an item and kill some dudes, and that's it. So it's again, nothing revolutionary. This is something a little bit off topic, but I would like to see some more prismatic abilities added at some point. Something that was cool post Lightfall was that we got new fragments and aspects as the seasons went along, and that kind of helped to mix up the gameplay loop, because you were also getting new exotics that were catering to those new aspects and abilities, and that would be cool. Not saying that the exotics we got aren't cool at all, because they are, and Stasis definitely needs the love. But at the same time, it would be nice to see new grenades for Stasis, just everything. You could add one of each thing, like a new ability, a new aspect fragment, etc. Would be really cool at some point. I think that would help a lot with the gameplay loop, just because everything will get stale eventually. I could be, predicting the future here, maybe next episode that'll happen, or it could be in the next expansion, which is slowly but surely coming up, in Apollo, which is going to release sometime in the spring of 2025, which is, again, very far away for that to be, that long. But who knows, maybe they'll just release every single ability known to man into Prismatic and kind of merge everything into one subclass. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But Act 2 and Revenant in general, I think I speak for a majority of the community when I say this, it's really been underwhelming. But we still have one act to go. So hopefully that wraps everything up nicely, and well, we'll just have to see. Anyways, that's it. See ya.